The bunker looked abandoned from the road. Yet when Lieutenant James Carter forced open the steel door, warm air rolled out, electric lights were still burning, and a teleprinter began typing by itself in an empty communications room. While one American soldier noticed a fresh cup beside the machine, and another found a cable disappearing through the rear wall toward a German unit that had supposedly surrendered hours earlier. In April 1945, Lieutenant James Carter led 10 American soldiers toward a concrete bunker built into a wooded hillside outside a German town near Kassel, where retreating troops had abandoned trucks, ammunition boxes, and telephone wire along the road. The entrance looked sealed until Sergeant Miles found one steel door hanging slightly open beneath camouflage netting. Carter entered with 2 men and immediately felt warm air moving through the corridor. Electric bulbs burned along the ceiling, a ventilation fan still turned behind a grill, and a diesel generator hummed somewhere below, even though no guard, clerk, or radio operator answered their calls. The first room contained empty bunks and half-packed field bags, but the second held maps pinned to a wall and 3 telephones resting off their hooks. One handset carried a faint clicking noise, suggesting the line remained connected to equipment outside the bunker. Private Evans followed the sound into a communications room where a German teleprinter suddenly began striking letters onto a paper roll. No one touched the keyboard, yet the machine printed a short group of numbers, paused, then started again while a signal lamp blinked beside it. Carter ordered the paper left in place and searched the desk. He found a warm metal cup, a cigarette crushed only halfway, and a railway timetable open to a station 20 miles north, signs that someone had occupied the room far more recently than the abandoned road outside suggested. Miles inspected the rear wall and found a thick communication cable disappearing through a narrow service tunnel. The cable carried current, and an Army signal technician warned that cutting it before tracing the connection could destroy whatever information was still moving through the network. The soldiers opened a locked cabinet beside the teleprinter and discovered stacks of message forms, most burned around the edges but still readable. Several referred to German units that had already surrendered, while one message ordered Station K to remain active until a final confirmation arrived after sunset. Carter sent Evans outside to question civilians in the nearest houses. A railway worker said the bunker belonged to a regional communications office and claimed its staff had evacuated before dawn, yet he also remembered seeing a small truck enter the forest after the main German column had already left town. Back inside, the teleprinter produced another line, this time including the number of an American prisoner camp recently taken over by U.S. troops. Carter compared it with his field map and realized the machine was receiving information from locations now behind Allied lines. A floor hatch near the generator opened onto a lower chamber filled with batteries and telephone switching equipment. On one table lay a fresh list of American vehicle numbers, including Carter's own unit convoy, which had not been published on any German document found in the town. Carter sealed the bunker entrance and requested military intelligence instead of shutting the system down. What looked like an abandoned command post was still receiving live traffic, and someone outside knew enough about American movements to keep feeding it information after the German front around the town had collapsed. Subscribe for more forgotten German POW stories like this one. Captain Robert Hale from Army Intelligence arrived before noon with 2 signal specialists and ordered the teleprinter isolated from every local line except the one already active. Rather than answer the incoming traffic, he told the technicians to copy each message exactly and identify the stations by their timing patterns. The first trace led to an abandoned post office in a village 6 miles away. Carter entered with military police and found the switchboard empty, but one cable had been recently spliced through the basement wall toward a civilian telephone exchange. A German operator named Marta Weiss was found hiding in a storage room with a notebook of call times. She insisted she had been forced to keep one circuit open after the military staff left, because a man wearing an Army communications uniform had threatened her family if she disconnected it. Hale compared her notebook with the bunker messages and found that several transmissions began only minutes after American convoys passed through nearby checkpoints. Someone was observing Allied traffic and relaying the information through civilian lines rather than operating from one hidden headquarters. Carter returned to the bunker while Hale questioned the operator. The teleprinter suddenly produced a longer message ordering Station K to divert 3 packages from a medical convoy before nightfall, followed by the same American prisoner camp number seen earlier. A map search identified Station K as a disused railway freight depot near the edge of another town. Hale sent Carter's patrol there while keeping the bunker active so the sender would not know the Americans had intercepted the system. At the depot, the Americans found no soldiers, but 3 sealed railway crates sat beneath a loading canopy beside a truck with German plates painted over in gray. Each crate carried American medical supply labels pasted over older German markings. Carter opened the first 2 and found bandages and surgical tools exactly as listed. The third contained civilian clothing, blank identity cards, and photographs of German officers whose capture records showed them already inside Allied custody. A railway clerk surrendered from an attic office and admitted that men had been moved through the depot under false medical paperwork. He said the communications bunker transmitted convoy timings, so the group knew when roads and checkpoints would be occupied by legitimate American traffic. Before the clerk could name the organizer, a hidden telephone rang on his desk. Carter answered without speaking and heard a German voice say that Station K had 10 minutes to destroy the blue ledger and move the remaining files south. The soldiers searched the office and found a blue accounting book beneath a loose floorboard. It listed vehicle numbers, forged identities, and payments besides several German names. But one page had been ripped out where the American camp number should have appeared. Hale ordered the medical convoy mentioned in the message stopped before it reached the depot. The search uncovered 2 German prisoners hidden beneath empty supply boxes in one truck, both carrying papers that identified them as civilian hospital workers. The escalation changed the meaning of the working bunker. It was not simply transmitting military information after surrender. It was guiding a live escape network through Allied-controlled territory, and the missing ledger page suggested someone inside an American-run prisoner facility was helping it continue. Hale sent the 2 prisoners from the medical truck to separate interrogation rooms and ordered the American camp, named in the messages, searched without warning its local staff. Carter traveled with the military police because the missing ledger page might identify whoever had access to transfer schedules. At the camp, the commandant produced clean rosters showing every prisoner present. Yet Carter noticed that 3 men listed in the infirmary had no recent medical notes. The doctor checked the beds and found only folded blankets beneath the name cards, proving the roster had been maintained after the men disappeared. A clerk named Daniel Price admitted receiving corrected prisoner lists from an American sergeant attached to transportation. The corrections usually arrived after midnight and ordered him to keep certain names active until official transfer papers came through. Hale examined the corrected forms and found the same spacing pattern used in the bunker messages. The sergeant, Walter Mason, had already left the camp that morning in a captured German staff car, claiming he was carrying records to division headquarters. Carter followed the vehicle route and found the staff car abandoned beside a quarry road. Inside were American fuel coupons, German civilian coats, and the torn page from the blue ledger. But Mason and the 3 missing prisoners were gone. The page showed that Mason had received payments from a German signals officer named Colonel Erich Bauer, the former commander of the bunker. Bauer had surrendered on paper 2 days earlier under a different unit, yet no fingerprints had been taken before he was moved to a temporary cage. Military police checked the cage and discovered Bauer's listed prisoner number belonged to another man with a similar age and build. The substitute admitted being promised extra food and early transfer if he answered to Bauer's name during counts. Hale ordered every nearby roadblock given Bauer's photograph, but the communications network responded first. The teleprinter in the bunker printed a warning that the quarry line is burned, and directed all remaining stations to switch to a reserve circuit. Within minutes, the machine stopped receiving. Signal technicians traced the failure to a junction box several miles away where someone had physically cut the cable and removed the switching plate, ending the Americans' ability to monitor the network. The interruption created an immediate operational consequence. A legitimate American fuel convoy was redirected by forged signs onto a narrow road and became trapped behind a collapsed bridge, delaying supplies needed by units moving east. At the same time, an Army hospital reported that 2 men wearing medical transport papers had attempted to collect a wounded German officer whose name appeared in the blue ledger. Hospital staff refused the transfer only because the patient's bandage number did not match the paperwork. Carter realized the network no longer needed the bunker once its routes were exposed. Bauer was now using prepared documents and compromised transportation staff to move people directly, while every false order forced American units to spend time checking paperwork instead of advancing. The major consequence fell on the entire district when Hale suspended prisoner transfers, medical pickups involving German captives, and civilian contractor access until identities could be verified. Thousands of legitimate movements slowed because one hidden system had made every paper order suspect. That evening, Carter returned to the silent bunker and found the generator still running even though the teleprinter had stopped. Beneath the switching table, a secondary indicator lamp blinked on a circuit the technicians had overlooked, proving the bunker was still connected to something else that had never used the main telephone line. The major reversal began when a signal technician followed the secondary circuit through the bunker floor and discovered it did not leave toward the civilian telephone network. The cable ran deeper into the hillside through an older armored conduit marked as a railway control line. Engineers opened the conduit and traced it to a small underground room sealed behind a concrete partition. Inside were relay switches, a recording device, and rolls of punched paper tape containing every message sent through the bunker during the previous 3 weeks. Hale compared the tapes with the live messages and discovered that many transmissions had not originated from Bauer's network at all. The bunker automatically repeated traffic from railway control stations, which meant some messages the Americans assumed were escape instructions could be ordinary coded train movements. A German signal technician captured nearby was brought in to translate the system. He identified packages as a railway term sometimes used for special freight, but confirmed that Bauer had deliberately reused the same wording to hide prisoner movements among legitimate traffic. The recordings gave Hale something the fugitives did not expect the Americans to possess: a complete timeline. Investigators matched each suspicious message with road logs, hospital transfers, and prisoner counts, separating Bauer's forged traffic from normal railway operations. One repeated destination appeared only in Bauer's messages: a mountain switching station called Eichenwald. Carter led a patrol there and found the station apparently abandoned, but the signal board inside still showed one freight track occupied beyond a closed maintenance tunnel. The Americans entered the tunnel on foot and discovered a short train hidden behind canvas screens. Its passenger car held the 3 missing prisoners, while the baggage car contained stacks of forged Allied documents and radio equipment taken from the bunker network. Bauer was not among them. One prisoner explained that he had left an hour earlier with Sergeant Mason, carrying a portable transmitter and a metal document case toward an old railway dispatch tower overlooking the valley. Carter reached the tower before sunset and found Mason outside attempting to start a motorcycle. Mason surrendered when the patrol blocked the road, then warned that Bauer was upstairs with the case and believed an American armored column was approaching along the valley road. Hale realized Bauer intended to use the portable transmitter to send a false demolition order to a railway engineering team guarding a bridge ahead of that column. If accepted, the order could close the route and create the confusion needed for another escape. Carter entered the tower with one interpreter and called up to Bauer that the bunker recordings had already exposed the network. Bauer answered by dropping the metal case down the stairwell rather than destroying it. then came down with empty hands after learning the hidden train had been found. The case contained original payment records, forged American passes, and the missing switching codes. More importantly, it proved Mason had joined Bauer for money rather than being coerced, reversing the assumption that German fugitives alone had kept the system alive behind Allied lines. Hale transmitted an immediate cancellation to the bridge engineers and preserved the route for the approaching column. Bauer's final deception failed because the bunker everyone thought was merely a live communications post had also been recording the very network built to exploit it. By nightfall, the secondary recorder was removed under guard while the main teleprinter remained untouched. The machine that had seemed dangerous because it still worked became the strongest evidence in the case, preserving names, times, and routes that Bauer believed had vanished with every transmitted message. Army intelligence converted the bunker into a temporary evidence station and brought in clerks from units unaffected by the compromised transport network. Each punch paper message was numbered, photographed, and matched with a physical event before investigators reopened any suspended route. The first review restored legitimate medical transfers after doctors received new forms carrying fingerprints and photographs. Prisoners who actually needed hospital treatment could move again without using the paperwork Bauer's group had copied. The second review corrected the identities of men hidden under false names. The 3 prisoners recovered from the tunnel were returned to their proper records, while officers who had purchased new identities were separated for further investigation. Mason faced a military hearing where Price, the camp clerk, produced the midnight corrections he had received. The payment records from Bauer's case matched dates when Mason altered prisoner lists and redirected vehicles, making the collaboration visible without relying on a confession. Bauer was questioned about the railway messages and admitted choosing transportation codes because Americans listening briefly would struggle to distinguish ordinary freight instructions from escape orders. He had expected the whole system to disappear when the telephone circuit was cut. The punch tapes defeated that plan. Investigators identified 2 additional civilian contractors who had supplied clothing and fuel, and both were detained before they could leave the district with forged work permits. Hale then reopened the prisoner camp under a verification system requiring 2 officers to approve any identity change. Medical names, labor classifications, and transfer numbers could no longer be altered by 1 transportation sergeant after normal office hours. Carter returned to Eichenwald with engineers and watched them move the hidden train onto the open line. Its canvas screens were removed, its forged documents taken away, and the passenger carriage was reused for ordinary military transport after inspection. At the original bunker, technicians disconnected the escape network but kept the generator running long enough to test every remaining circuit. One by one, the lights on the switching board went dark until only the local power indicator remained. Before shutting it down, Carter watched the teleprinter produce one final automatic railway message from a legitimate station. The paper advanced, printed an ordinary freight number, and stopped with no one hiding behind the code. Hale tore off that final strip and placed it beside Bauer's first intercepted message in the evidence file. The contrast showed exactly how the deception worked. The same machine had carried normal railway traffic and criminal instructions, depending entirely on who controlled the codes. The irreversible result came when copies of the recovered switching codes and forged pass numbers reached every American checkpoint in the region. Bauer's documents became useless beyond the bunker, and the remaining escape routes closed before another prisoner could be moved under them. Mason departed under American guard, Bauer under separate prisoner escort, while the legitimate medical and supply convoys resumed their routes. The bunker no longer controlled anything outside its walls, and every message it had preserved now belonged to the investigators rather than the men who built the network. Carter was the last soldier to leave. He switched off the generator, waited for the ventilation fan to slow, and watched the ceiling bulbs fade one after another, ending the strange life of a bunker that had continued working after the army around it had already disappeared. Weeks later, Carter returned when engineers prepared to seal the bunker permanently. The teleprinter had been removed, the cables labeled, and Bauer's messages stored in Army archives, but the warm cup still sat where the patrol had first found it. Carter carried the cup outside, placed it on the concrete step, and watched workers close the steel door. What had seemed like an abandoned room with electricity still flowing through it had become evidence of a network that survived only because everyone assumed the war had already ended there. Most people know how World War II ended. Very few know what happened inside these prison camps. Subscribe for more Untold WWII stories.